out of the damn car, you black trash! You think you can just drive a stolen ride in broad daylight?
A highway outside Chicago, Sunday morning. A white officer screaming at a black woman over a car she owned.
This SUV matches a stolen vehicle. Dark color. Illinois plates. That's you. Hands behind your back.
Officer, this is my car. I can show you the registration.
Shut up!
Cold metal clicked around her wrists. Right there on the highway, in front of everyone. Cars slowed. People stared. No one said a word. But what Hollis didn't know, and what someone was about to tell him, would turn this moment into the end of his career. To understand what happened on that highway, you need to know who Grace Anderson really was. Not the woman in handcuffs, not the woman being screamed at by a man with a badge. The woman before all of that. Grace Anderson was the governor of Illinois. She had held the office for 3 years. Before that, she spent 2 decades as a civil rights attorney, fighting cases most lawyers wouldn't touch. Police brutality, wrongful convictions, housing discrimination. She built her career in courtrooms where the odds were stacked against her clients and won anyway. The people of Illinois elected her because she didn't just talk about justice, she had bled for it. But on Sundays, Grace Anderson was not the governor. On Sundays, she was a daughter. Every week, without exception, she drove from the governor's residence in Springfield to her mother's house in Chicago. 200 miles. 3.5 hours. She made the drive alone. No security detail, no state trooper escort, no motorcade. She had refused all of it since her first week in office. Her staff hated it. Her chief of security called it reckless. Her sister Eleanor called it stubborn. Grace called it necessary. "The day I need a motorcade to visit my mother," she once told her press secretary, "is the day I've forgotten who I work for." She drove a dark blue SUV from the state's executive fleet, standard plates, no governor's seal on the doors, no flags on the hood. If you passed her on the highway, you would see a black woman in a cream blouse driving a clean car and listening to gospel music. That was exactly what Grace wanted. One morning a week where power was invisible. One morning where she was just Dorothy Anderson's youngest daughter, bringing cornbread to Sunday dinner. That particular morning, she had woken at 5:45. No alarm. Old habit from her years preparing for early court hearings. She dressed simply, poured her coffee into a travel mug, and checked her phone. One text from her sister. Senator Eleanor Anderson, 8 years older, sharper tongue, sat on the Senate Judiciary Committee in Washington. The text read, "Heading to Mama's today? Bring 2 pans of cornbread and call me on the road. We need to talk about the judiciary vote." Grace smiled and typed back, "Yes, ma'am." She placed her phone in the center console, screen facing up. Eleanor's contact name glowed on the display. Big Sis, Senator. She pulled out of the residence at 6:15 and turned onto the highway toward Chicago. The drive was quiet. Fields gave way to suburbs. Suburbs gave way to highway sprawl. Grace kept the radio on low, a gospel station out of Decatur that her mother had listened to for 40 years. She hummed along. The road was open. The sky was gray and soft. It felt like peace. Now, you need to know about the man who took that peace away. Sergeant Derek Hollis had been with the Illinois State Highway Patrol for 14 years. He was 41 years old, white, broad-shouldered, and loud. He believed in 2 things: the authority of the badge and the certainty of his own instincts. His record told a different story than the one he told himself. 7 excessive force complaints in 5 years, all filed by Black or Latino drivers, all investigated internally, all cleared. His union representative described him as effective and decisive. Community activists in 3 counties described him as something else entirely. One complaint involved a 19-year-old college student pulled over for a broken taillight. Hollis had forced the young man to lie face down on hot pavement for 11 minutes while he searched the car. He found nothing. No charges were filed against either of them. That morning, Hollis was parked at a staging area off I-55 with his partner, Trooper Nathan Price. Price was 26, 3 months out of the academy. Quiet, nervous, eager to learn, but terrified of learning the wrong lessons. Hollis leaned against the cruiser, sipping gas station coffee and scrolling through his phone. He showed Price a news article about a new state policy requiring body cameras on all traffic stops. Real-time activation. No officer override. "You see this?" Hollis said, shaking his head. "Another politician sitting in an office telling us how to do our jobs. They've never spent 1 minute on a highway. Not one." Price said nothing. He just nodded and looked at his boots. The radio crackled. Dispatch reported a vehicle matching the description of one involved in a carjacking 2 counties south. Dark-colored SUV, Illinois plates. That was it. No make, no model, no year, no partial plate number. Just a dark SUV somewhere on a highway in Illinois. On any given day, that description matched thousands of vehicles. But Hollis sat up straight. His eyes narrowed. He tossed his coffee cup into the trash and climbed into the cruiser. "Let's go fishing," he said. Price hesitated. "Sarge, that description is pretty broad. Shouldn't we wait for more details from dispatch?" Hollis turned the key. "I've been doing this for 14 years, kid. You learn to trust your gut." They pulled onto I-55, heading north toward Chicago. Meanwhile, Grace was 20 miles ahead. She had just passed a small church where a Sunday service was letting out. Cars lined the gravel lot. Children in pressed shirts chased each other between the vehicles. She slowed and smiled. On the shoulder just beyond the church, a gray minivan sat with its hazard lights blinking. A flat tire. An older black man in a dark suit, Pastor Raymond Cole, 63, beloved in 3 counties, was kneeling beside the wheel while 2 members of his congregation helped with the jack. Grace slowed as she passed. She gave a small wave through the window. One of the churchgoers, a younger man who served on the governor's community advisory board, squinted at the SUV. "Was that?" he murmured to Cole. Cole glanced up, shook his head. "Couldn't tell. Come on, hand me the lug wrench." Grace picked up speed. A mile later, her phone rang. Eleanor. She tapped the speaker button. "Morning, big sis." "Morning. You on 55? Just past Wilmington." "Good. Listen, the judiciary vote is Thursday, and I need to talk strategy. But first, did you actually make cornbread, or did you buy it from that bakery again? Because Mama will know. She always knows." Grace laughed. "I made it. 2 pans. From scratch." "That's my girl." The sisters talked. About politics. About cornbread. About whether their mother's roses had survived the late frost. For 12 minutes, Grace Anderson was not the governor of anything. She was just a little sister, being bossed around by her big sister on a Sunday morning. Then she glanced in the rearview mirror. Red and blue lights, flashing hard. A highway patrol cruiser accelerating fast, swerving into the lane directly behind her. Grace checked her speedometer. 63 miles per hour. The limit was 65. She signaled, pulled to the right shoulder, stopped, put the car in park, placed both hands on the wheel. "Eleanor, hold on. I'm being pulled over." "Pulled over? For what?" "I don't know yet." Behind her, the cruiser parked aggressively close. The door swung open hard enough to bounce on its hinges. Sergeant Derek Hollis stepped out. He didn't walk toward the SUV. He strode, one hand on his belt, the other already pointing. Hollis reached the driver's window in 4 steps. He did not greet her. He did not introduce himself. He did not ask for license or registration. Every protocol drilled into officers at the academy. Identify yourself, state the reason for the stop, request documentation. He skipped all of it. He went straight to the command. Step out of the vehicle. Grace kept her hands on the wheel. She had spent 20 years training clients for exactly this moment. Stay calm. Speak clearly. Narrate your movements. Do not give them a reason. Officer, I'm happy to cooperate, she said. May I ask why I've been pulled over? Hollis leaned closer. His shadow filled the window. I'm not going to ask you twice. Step out. I understand, officer. I'm going to reach for my license now. It's in the sun visor above me. I'm going to move slowly. She raised her right hand toward the visor. Slowly. Deliberately. The way she had told hundreds of clients to do in her old practice. Announce every movement. Move like the whole world is watching. Because sometimes it is. Her fingers had barely touched the visor when Hollis slapped her hand away. Not pushed, slapped. Open palm against the back of her hand, hard enough to sting. Hard enough that the sound carried through the open phone line. Did I say reach for anything? His voice cracked with fury. Hands on the wheel, both of them. Now! Grace placed her hands back, 10 and 2. Her jaw tightened. Her breathing changed, shorter, controlled. Not fear, something older than fear. Something every black person in America learns to carry before they learn to drive. On the phone, Eleanor had gone silent, listening. In the passenger seat of the cruiser, Trooper Nathan Price stood at the opposite window. He could see Grace's face. He could see her hands, perfectly still on the steering wheel. He could see that she was not resisting, not reaching, not threatening. He opened his mouth, almost said something, almost said, Sarge. But the word died in his throat. He needed this job. He had student loans, a new apartment, a mother back in Peoria who told everyone her son was a state trooper now. He swallowed the word and looked down at the asphalt. That silence would cost him more than he knew. Hollis ordered Grace out of the car. She complied, slowly, methodically, exactly as trained. She unbuckled her seatbelt, placed one foot on the pavement, then the other. She stood with her hands visible at her sides. He pointed to the shoulder of the highway. Stand over there. Face the car. Hands on the roof. She was now standing on the side of a highway, palms flat against her own vehicle, while traffic rushed past at 65 miles an hour. A Sunday morning spectacle. A woman who had committed no crime being displayed like a suspect in a drug raid. Hollis began a pat-down. No probable cause, no stated reason. He didn't ask permission because he didn't believe he needed it. Grace spoke again. Not louder, not angrier. If anything, quieter. The kind of quiet that comes from years of channeling fury into precision. Sergeant, you have not stated a reason for this stop. You have not asked for identification. You have not provided your name or badge number. I have cooperated with every instruction. I need you to tell me what this is about. Every sentence was a brick, laid carefully, stacked with purpose. Hollis stepped back. For half a second, something flickered behind his eyes. Not doubt. Irritation. The irritation of a man who expected fear and got composure instead. It's about the fact that you're driving a vehicle matching a stolen car description, he said. And you're acting real suspicious for someone who claims to be innocent. I would like to see that description. You don't get to make demands here. Inside the SUV, Grace's phone still glowed on the center console. Eleanor was still listening. Every word, every sound. The slap of a hand, the click of a belt, The slow hum of traffic passing a woman whose only crime was driving while black on a Sunday morning. Then another sound, behind them. Tires crunching gravel. A car pulling onto the shoulder. Then another. A gray minivan with a flat tire that had been recently changed. Pastor Raymond Cole stepped out. His Sunday suit was still dusty at the knees. He held up his phone. The red light was on. He was already recording. Hollis didn't notice Cole. He didn't notice the phone. He didn't notice the red recording light or the gray minivan parked 30 yards behind his cruiser. He was too focused on the woman in front of him. The woman who wouldn't break. That bothered him more than he would ever admit. He keyed his shoulder radio. "Dispatch, run the plates again on the dark blue SUV. Illinois tag, I-55 northbound, mile marker 238. The radio crackled. A pause. Then dispatch came back with a voice that was calm and bored, the way dispatchers always sound when the answer is obvious. "Sergeant, those plates come back registered to the State of Illinois Executive Fleet. Vehicle assigned to the office of the governor. No flags, no warrants, no reports." Executive Fleet. Office of the governor. A competent officer would have stopped right there. A competent officer would have taken one step back, reconsidered the situation, and realized that the vague description of a dark SUV with Illinois plates had led him to a dead end. A competent officer would have apologized, returned the woman's dignity, and driven away. Derek Hollis was not that officer. "Probably stolen plates," he muttered into the radio. "Run the VIN when I get it. I'm going to search the vehicle." He turned back to Grace. She was still standing with her palms flat on the roof of the SUV. Her cream blouse had a smudge of road dust on the sleeve. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon. She had not moved. "Sit down over there," Hollis said, pointing to the guardrail at the edge of the highway. On the ground. Grace looked at the guardrail, looked at the gravel beneath it, looked at her slacks, her blouse, the shoes she had put on that morning in the quiet of the governor's residence while the sun was still coming up. She walked to the guardrail. She did not sit on the ground. She sat on the rail itself. A small act, almost invisible. But it was not compliance. It was choice. The difference between being pushed down and choosing where to land. Hollis didn't argue. He had already moved on to the SUV. In America, at that moment, a black woman who had broken no law sat on a highway guardrail while a white officer with 7 complaints in his file searched her car without consent, without a warrant, and without cause. This was not an unusual story. According to the Stanford Open Policing Project, which analyzed over 200 million traffic stops across the country, black drivers were 20% more likely to be stopped than white drivers. Once stopped, they were twice as likely to be searched. This was not an opinion. This was data. And Grace Anderson was living inside it. Hollis opened the passenger door, pulled open the glove box. Papers spilled out. Registration documents, insurance cards. And underneath them, a folder stamped with the seal of the state of Illinois. Official letterhead, the office of the governor. He held the folder for a moment, read the seal, read the letterhead. His thumb traced the embossed eagle at the top of the page. Then he closed the folder and set it on the seat. "So you work for the state," he said over his shoulder. "That's supposed to impress me? A lot of people work for the state. Doesn't mean they're not driving stolen cars." Grace said nothing. She had shifted. Something inside her had changed in the last few minutes. She was no longer just cooperating. She was documenting. Every word, every action, every violation of protocol. She was building a case the way she had built cases for 20 years. Brick by brick, fact by fact, in silence. On the center console, her phone rang again. The screen lit up. "Big Sis. Senator." The 4th call in 12 minutes. Price saw it. He was standing at the rear of the SUV, arms crossed, trying to disappear into his own uniform. His eyes locked on the screen. Big Sis. Senator. His lips parted. He looked toward Hollis. Hollis was elbow deep in the back seat and didn't see it. Price said nothing. Again, the phone stopped ringing. 5 seconds of silence. Then it rang a 5th time. This time the auto-answer feature kicked in, a setting Eleanor had configured months ago, insisting that if Grace was ever in trouble and couldn't pick up, the call would answer itself after 5 rings. The line connected. Eleanor Anderson, United States Senator, member of the Judiciary Committee, was now listening to everything happening on the shoulder of I-55. She heard the traffic. She heard the wind. She heard Hollis rummaging through her sister's belongings. She did not speak. She did not announce herself. She simply listened. And then she picked up a second phone. Hollis continued his search. He found Grace's leather bag in the back seat, unzipped it, pulled out a leather portfolio. Inside was a framed photograph, Grace Anderson standing beside the President of the United States at a state dinner. Both smiling, both in formal attire, the presidential seal gleaming on the podium behind them. Hollis stared at the photo for 3 full seconds. His jaw moved slightly, like he was chewing on a thought he couldn't quite swallow. Then his expression hardened. He tossed the portfolio back into the car. The frame hit the center console and cracked down the middle. Grace heard the crack. She closed her eyes. That photograph had been taken the night the president signed the Voting Rights Reauthorization Act. Grace had spent 3 years lobbying for that bill. The frame had been a gift from her mother. She opened her eyes. She did not cry. She did not react. She filed it away. Another brick. On the shoulder behind them, Cole's live stream was growing. What had started with a handful of curious church members was now 1,200 viewers, then 2,000, then 5,000. The comments poured in faster than anyone could read. Who is that woman? Why is she in cuffs? Someone call a lawyer. This is America. Hollis walked back to Grace. He stood over her, hands on his hips. He had found nothing. No drugs, no weapons, no stolen property, no warrants, no traffic violation. Nothing. But he had gone too far to back down now. Admitting he was wrong would mean admitting what the stop was really about. And men like Derek Hollis do not admit that. Ever. So he escalated. "I'm calling a canine unit," he said. "We're going to let the dogs have a look at your vehicle." Grace looked up at him. "Sergeant, under Rodriguez versus United States, you cannot extend a traffic stop beyond its original purpose to conduct a canine search without reasonable suspicion. You have none. You've found nothing. This stop has lasted 22 minutes. She paused, let every word settle. "I have cooperated with every instruction. I have not raised my voice. I have done everything right. And we both know that is not going to matter." For the first time, her voice carried something other than composure. Not anger, not fear. Weariness. The bone-deep exhaustion of a woman who had fought this fight 1,000 times. In courtrooms, in boardrooms, in parking lots, on highways. And knew that being right had never been enough to keep her safe. "So do what you're going to do, Sergeant." Hollis did. He grabbed her wrist, pulled her to her feet, spun her around. The handcuffs went on right there, on the shoulder of a highway, in full view of passing traffic and a live stream that had just crossed 14,000 viewers. Cole's hands were shaking, but he held the phone steady. "Lord have mercy," he whispered. "Lord have mercy." Price turned away. He couldn't watch. His hand went to his face. His shoulders dropped. He stood there, back to the scene, staring at the cruiser's tire like it held some kind of answer. It didn't. Grace stood perfectly still, cuffed, straight-backed, eyes forward. She did not struggle. She did not plead. She looked like exactly what she was. A woman of immense power being stripped of every visible trace of it by a man who had none of his own. And then, in the distance, a sound, not sirens, not horns, something else. The low growl of engines. Multiple vehicles, moving fast. Hollis looked up, squinted against the morning sun. 3 black SUVs crested the hill a half-mile north. State police insignia on the doors. Lights flashing, moving in formation, moving with purpose, moving toward him. "What the hell is that?" Hollis said. He didn't know it yet, but the phone call Eleanor Anderson had made 11 minutes ago had just arrived. The 3 SUVs pulled onto the shoulder in a tight line. No hesitation, no confusion. They parked with military precision. One behind Hollis's cruiser, one beside it, one ahead of Grace's vehicle. Doors opened simultaneously. 6 doors, 6 people. Every one of them in a position to end Sergeant Derek Hollis's career before lunch. Lieutenant Governor Brenda Shaw stepped out of the lead vehicle first. She was 59 years old, 5'4", gray blazer over a white blouse, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She looked like a woman who had been interrupted in the middle of her Sunday morning paperwork. She looked like someone's favorite aunt arriving at a family barbecue. But the way she walked told a different story. Shaw did not look at Hollis. She did not acknowledge his cruiser. She did not glance at Price or at Cole or at the growing line of cars slowing down to watch. She walked directly to Grace Anderson. Straight line, no detour, every step deliberate. Hollis stepped forward. Instinct, territory. "Ma'am, this is an active traffic stop. I'm going to need you to step back to your—" Shaw held up one hand. She did not turn around. She did not raise her voice. She simply held up her hand the way a woman holds up her hand when a fly is buzzing near her ear. Hollis stopped mid-sentence. Shaw reached Grace. She looked at the handcuffs. She looked at the dust on Grace's blouse. She looked at the crack running down the center of the photo frame visible through the open car door. She took all of it in, every detail, every indignity, in 2 seconds flat. Then she spoke. Clear. Calm. Loud enough for Hollis to hear. Loud enough for Cole's live stream to capture. Loud enough for the 14,000 people watching on their phones to feel the words land like a hammer on glass. "Governor Anderson? Are you all right?" Governor. The word hit the air and everything stopped. The highway noise faded. The wind died. Cole's hands froze on his phone. Price's head snapped up like he had been slapped. 2 passing cars braked so hard their tires chirped on the pavement. And Derek Hollis, Sergeant Derek Hollis, 14-year veteran, 7 complaints, 0 consequences, felt his stomach drop through the floor of the earth. "What?" he said. The word came out small, smaller than any word he had spoken all morning. Behind Shaw, Colonel James Whitfield stepped out of the second vehicle, the superintendent of the Illinois State Police, Hollis's boss's boss's boss. He was wearing his full-dress uniform, dark blue, gold insignia, campaign ribbons. He looked like judgment itself climbing out of an SUV on a Sunday morning. Behind Whitfield, 2 members of the governor's executive protection detail, the security team Grace had declined to bring that morning, took positions on either side of the motorcade. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Shaw turned now, slowly. She looked at Hollis for the first time. Her eyes moved from his face to his badge, to his nameplate, to his hands, which were trembling at his sides. She studied him the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, clinical, thorough, without a trace of sympathy. "Sergeant," she said. The woman you have in handcuffs is Grace Anderson, governor of the state of Illinois, your commander-in-chief, the person who signs the budget that pays your salary, funds your precinct, and keeps the lights on in your station house. She paused. Let the silence do its work. Would you like to explain to me why she is standing on the side of a highway in handcuffs? Hollis opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked at Grace, then at Whitfield, then back at Shaw. His eyes darted like a man looking for an exit in a room with no doors. He reached for the handcuffs. His hands were shaking so badly that the key scraped against the metal twice before finding the hole. Don't. Grace's voice. One word. Quiet. Final. Don't touch me again. Hollis froze. His hand hung in the air. The key dangled between his fingers. He stood there, a man who had spent the last 30 minutes exercising absolute power over another human being, now unable to complete the simplest mechanical task because the ground beneath his authority had vanished. Colonel Whitfield stepped forward. He moved past Hollis without looking at him. He approached Grace and produced a handcuff key from his pocket. His movements were gentle, careful. He unlocked the left cuff first, then the right. He placed the handcuffs in his own pocket. Not in Hollis's hand, not on Hollis's belt, in his own pocket. Then he stepped back and spoke to Hollis in a voice that was barely above a whisper. But whispers carry on a quiet highway, and Cole's microphone caught every syllable. Sergeant Hollis, step away from the governor. Do not speak. Do not move. Do not reach for your radio. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Hollis took one step back, then another. His boots scraped the gravel. He looked like a man sleepwalking through the worst dream of his life. And then, from behind them, movement. Trooper Nathan Price stepped forward. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't ask to be recognized. He removed his hat. He held it against his chest. His eyes were red. His chin was trembling. 26 years old and already carrying a weight that would follow him for the rest of his career. Governor Anderson, he said, I'm sorry. I should have stopped this. I watched it happen, and I knew it was wrong from the first second, and I didn't say a word. I didn't do my job. I failed you. Grace looked at him. A long beat. She studied his face the way she had studied thousands of faces in courtrooms, searching for performance, for calculation, for the easy tears of a man protecting himself. She found none of those things. She found a young man who was terrified and ashamed, and telling the truth. She nodded once. You're going to have to live with that, son. What you do with it from here is up to you. Price put his hat back on. He stepped back into line. He did not look at Hollis. Then, the phone. Grace's SUV was still open. The center console still glowed, and from the speaker, a voice filled the air. Strong. Familiar. The voice of a woman who had been listening to every minute of the last half hour in complete silence. Grace? It's Eleanor. I heard everything. Every word. Colonel Whitfield is there because I called the superintendent's office directly. Are you hurt? Grace walked to the car. She leaned into the open door. She pressed her hand flat against the console, next to the cracked photograph of her and the president. I'm not hurt, Eleanor. A pause. One breath. I'm angry, and I'm going to use it. 30 yards behind the motorcade, a white news van pulled onto the shoulder. The door slid open before the vehicle had fully stopped. Tamara Wilkins, a reporter from the local affiliate, jumped out with a cameraman on her heels. The red light on his camera was already on. But she wasn't the only one broadcasting. Cole's live stream had exploded. 14,000 viewers had become 40,000. 40 became 60. 60 became 85,000. People were sharing the link faster than the platform could count. The comments were a flood. That's the governor? He cuffed the governor. This man is finished. Share this. Everyone needs to see this. Wilkins approached Grace with a microphone. Governor Anderson, can you tell us what happened here this morning? Grace straightened her blouse. She touched the dust on her sleeve. She did not smooth her hair or adjust her expression. She stood exactly as she was, rumpled, tired, furious, dignified, and spoke not as a politician giving a statement, but as a woman giving testimony. What happened to me this morning happens to black men and women across this country every single day. The difference between me and them is simple. A motorcade showed up for me. Most people don't get a motorcade. Most people get a record, or a hospital bed, or a funeral. She paused, the camera held on her face. 85,000 people held their breath. I didn't want to be the governor today. I wanted to be a daughter driving to see her mother. I wanted to bring cornbread to Sunday dinner, that's all. And I was denied that simple dignity by a man who saw my skin before he saw my humanity, before he saw anything at all. She looked directly into the camera, not at Wilkins, not at Cole's phone, into the lens, into the eyes of every person watching. I will personally review every excessive force complaint in this officer's file. I will request a full audit of traffic stop data across our state patrol, broken down by race, by district, by individual officer. And I will introduce legislation to ensure that what happened to me today is documented, investigated, and punished. Every single time. Not just when it happens to the governor. The crowd that had gathered, motorists pulled over to watch, churchgoers from Cole's congregation, a family in a red sedan with 2 children pressed against the back window, began to clap. It started slowly, a few hands, then more. Then it built and spread down the highway like a wave. Horns honked. People stepped out of their cars. A truck driver, 3 vehicles back, leaned on his air horn and held it. For 30 seconds, I-55 sounded like a stadium. Grace did not smile. She did not wave. She stood still and let the sound wash over her like rain. Then Whitfield turned to Hollis. The applause faded. The highway went quiet. Every eye, in person, on live stream, through Wilkins's camera, turned to watch. Whitfield extended his hand, not for a handshake, palm up, open, waiting. Badge. Hollis unclipped his badge, placed it in Whitfield's palm. Firearm. Hollis unholstered his weapon, handed it over. Radio. Cruiser keys, one by one, piece by piece. Every symbol of the authority Hollis had abused for 30 minutes was removed from his body and placed in someone else's hands. You are suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending a full internal affairs investigation, Whitfield said. You are under administrative order not to contact Governor Anderson, any witnesses, or any member of the press. Do you understand? Hollis tried. One last attempt. Colonel, I didn't know. I was following the stolen vehicle description. I was just doing my— You ran her plates and they came back to the state executive fleet, Whitfield said. You found official documents bearing the governor's seal. You found a photograph of her with the President of the United States. You were given every opportunity to stop, to think, to course correct. And at every single turn, Sergeant, you chose escalation. He leaned closer. Not for intimidation, for clarity. This isn't about not knowing who she was. This is about not caring who she was. Because in your mind, you already knew everything you needed to know the moment you looked through that window. Hollis had no answer. There was no answer. He was escorted to the back seat of a patrol vehicle. The door closed. The window was tinted. Nobody could see his face. Nobody needed to. Price watched the car pull away. Then he turned to Whitfield, removed his hat again. "Sir, I want to make a full statement. Everything that happened from the beginning. I should have intervened, and I want it on record that I failed to do so." Whitfield studied him. "That statement might save your career, Trooper, or it might end it. Are you sure?" "I'm sure, sir. It's the least I can do." Whitfield nodded once. "Then report to Internal Affairs at 0800 tomorrow. Bring nothing but the truth." And then one final detail. The detail that would play on every news broadcast for the next 72 hours. The detail that audiences would rewind and replay until it burned into the national consciousness. Hollis's body camera, the one he had forgotten to activate that morning, had been recording the entire time. Every word, every slap, every command, every second of those 30 minutes on the highway. It had been triggered remotely by dispatch at the start of the stop, an automatic activation feature, part of a new state policy requiring real-time body camera footage on all traffic stops with no officer override. The policy had been signed into law 18 months earlier by Governor Grace Anderson. 72 hours later, the world had seen everything. Cole's live stream had been viewed 28 million times. Hollis's body camera footage, every frame of those 30 minutes, had been released by the governor's office and picked up by every major network in the country. Cable news ran it on a loop. Morning shows dissected it frame by frame. Late-night hosts opened their monologues with it. Social media turned Grace Anderson's face into a symbol and Derek Hollis's name into a warning. But Grace was not interested in symbols. She was interested in systems. 3 days after the stop, she stood behind a podium at the Illinois State Capitol. No teleprompter, no prepared remarks, just a woman in a Navy suit who had spent 72 hours turning fury into policy. She announced 4 things. First, Sergeant Derek Hollis had been terminated from the Illinois State Police, effective immediately. A criminal investigation had been referred to the State Attorney General's office for unlawful detention, abuse of authority, and violation of civil rights. His 14-year career was over. His pension was under review. Second, she was ordering a statewide audit of all traffic stop data from the past 5 years. Every stop, every search, every use of force, broken down by race, by district, by individual officer. The data would be made public, not summarized, not filtered, not buried in a report that no one would read. Public, searchable, permanent. Third, mandatory de-escalation training for every officer in the State Patrol, co-developed with community leaders, civil rights organizations, and law enforcement professionals who understood that a badge was a responsibility, not a weapon. Pastor Raymond Cole had already been invited to serve on the advisory board. Fourth, she was introducing legislation she called Grace's Law. The bill would require real-time body camera activation on all traffic stops across the state. No officer override. No, I forgot to turn it on. No convenient malfunctions. The technology already existed. The political will had arrived. On a highway outside Chicago on a Sunday morning. Senator Eleanor Anderson issued a statement from Washington the same afternoon, announcing her intention to introduce federal legislation mirroring the state proposal. "What happened to my sister," she wrote, "happens to someone's sister in every state, every city, every day. Illinois will lead. The nation will follow." The Fraternal Order of Police released a carefully worded statement distancing themselves from Hollis. They called his actions inconsistent with the standards of professional law enforcement. They did not apologize. They did not mention race. But they knew which way the wind was blowing, and they adjusted their sails accordingly. The press conference lasted 18 minutes. Grace took no questions. She didn't need to. The footage had already said everything. That evening, Grace finally made the drive to Chicago. This time she had a security detail. Not because she wanted one, because her mother had called 3 times, and the third call ended with Dorothy Anderson saying, "Baby, if you don't bring those troopers with you, don't bother bringing the cornbread either." When Dorothy Anderson gave an order, even the governor listened. The SUV pulled up to a small brick house on the south side. Trimmed hedges, a porch light on, even though the sun was still up. Rose bushes along the walkway. Survivors of the late frost, just barely. Grace walked up the steps, carrying 2 pans of cornbread. The front door opened before she reached it. Dorothy Anderson was 78 years old. Small, silver-haired. Standing in the doorway in a house dress and slippers. She had watched every minute of the news coverage. She had seen her daughter in handcuffs on a highway. She had seen the body camera footage. She had seen the press conference. She did not say, "I'm proud of you." She did not say, "You were so brave." She did not say any of the things the rest of the country was saying. She looked at the 2 foil-covered pans and said, "Did you burn the edges again?" Grace laughed. Not the polished laugh of a governor at a fundraiser. The real one. The deep one. The one that came from the place where little girls still live inside grown women. "No, Mama, I did not burn the edges. We'll see about that. Come inside." They sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Grace had done homework as a child. The same table where her father had read the newspaper every morning before work. The same table where Dorothy had fed 2 daughters, buried a husband, and watched one girl become a senator and the other become a governor. Dorothy poured coffee, stirred in 2 sugars, set the mug in front of Grace without asking. Then she said something that stopped the room. "Your father got pulled over on that same highway. 1983. They made him lie face down on the asphalt. July. Over 100 degrees. He stayed there for 15 minutes while they searched his car. Found nothing. They let him go without a word." Grace set down her mug. "He never told you girls. Said he didn't want you to carry it. But I knew. He came home that night and sat in the driveway for an hour before he walked through the door. I watched him through the kitchen window. He just sat there, staring at the steering wheel." The room was quiet. The weight of 43 years settled between them. "The highway is the same, baby," Dorothy said. "But the signs are changing. Because of women like you." Eleanor called on speakerphone a few minutes later. The 3 Anderson women talked for an hour. Not about policy, not about Hollis, not about body cameras or audits or legislation. They talked about cornbread. About church, about whether the roses would make it to summer, about nothing and everything at the same time. And in a quiet office in Springfield, 26-year-old Nathan Price sat at a metal desk filling out a voluntary statement for internal affairs. Every detail, every moment he had stood silent, every second he had chosen his career over his conscience. He was formally reprimanded, but not terminated. His voluntary cooperation was noted. He was reassigned to the Community Liaison Unit, effective the following Monday. His first assignment was attending de-escalation training alongside Pastor Cole's congregation. On his first day, Cole met him at the door. The pastor studied him for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "You didn't speak up that day," Cole said. "But you're speaking now. That counts for something." Price shook his hand. "It doesn't count for enough, Pastor, but I'm going to spend the rest of my career trying to make it right." Cole nodded. "Then you're in the right place. Come on in." Derek Hollis's story did not end with redemption. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. His lawyer announced that Hollis would plead no contest to the civil rights charges. In a brief written statement released through his attorney, Hollis said 6 words that the country would debate for months. "I was wrong. Not because she was the governor, because she was a person. And I forgot that. Whether he meant those words, whether redemption is something earned in a courtroom or only in the decades that follow, was not for the public to decide. It was for Derek Hollis to prove. Alone. In the silence that comes after the cameras leave and the crowd goes home, and all that remains is a man sitting with the full weight of what he has done. 6 months later, a small crowd gathered on the shoulder of I-55 just south of mile marker 238, the same stretch of highway, the same patch of gravel where Grace Anderson had been ordered out of her car, the same guardrail where she had sat in handcuffs while the world watched through a phone screen. But today the highway looked different. A temporary stage had been built on the shoulder. Folding chairs lined the grass. State troopers directed traffic into a single lane. News vans from 4 networks were parked along the median. Cole stood in the front row in his Sunday suit, phone in his pocket for once. Price stood in the back, in civilian clothes, hands folded. He had not been invited. He came anyway. Grace stepped to the podium. She did not speak about policy. She did not mention Hollis. She did not reference the legislation, or the audit, or the 28 million views. She spoke about her mother. Dorothy Anderson had passed away 3 months after the incident. Quietly, in her sleep. In the brick house on the south side with the rose bushes and the porch light that was always on. She was 78 years old. She had lived long enough to see one daughter in the Senate and another in the governor's mansion. She had lived long enough to see the highway that had humiliated her husband turned into something else entirely. She had not lived long enough to see the sign. Grace pulled a cord. A dark cloth fell from a green highway sign mounted on a steel post beside the road. Dorothy Anderson Memorial Highway. White letters on green metal. Simple. Permanent. Visible to every driver heading north toward Chicago at 65 miles per hour. Grace stood at the podium and looked at the sign for a long time. Then she spoke. My mother never held public office. She never argued a case in court. She never signed a bill or gave a press conference or stood behind a podium like this one. She was a teacher's aide for 31 years. She raised 2 daughters on a single income after my father died. She made cornbread from scratch every Sunday and never once burned the edges, no matter what she accused me of. A quiet laugh moved through the crowd, but she taught me something that no law school, no campaign, no office could ever teach. She taught me what to do when the world tells you that you are less, not with speeches, not with protests, with 5 words. Grace paused. Her hand rested on the podium. Her eyes were steady. I was 9 years old, standing at a bus stop in Montgomery, Alabama, visiting my grandmother. There was a faded sign on the bench, old paint peeling at the edges. It said, "Whites only." I asked my mother what it meant. She knelt down, looked me in the eye, and said, Grace's voice cracked. For the first time in 6 months, for the first time since the handcuffs, for the first time since any of it. She said, "Baby, the sign is wrong. You are not." Silence on the highway. I believed her. I believed her when they told me I couldn't be a lawyer. I believed her when they told me I couldn't win the election. I believed her when a man with a badge told me to get out of my own car on this exact highway. She looked at the sign again, her mother's name in white letters against the sky. "Mama, the signs are changing. I wish you were here to see it." She stepped back from the podium. She did not wave. She did not take questions. She walked to the front row, sat down next to Eleanor, and held her sister's hand. The crowd applauded, not the roaring, honking applause of that Sunday morning 6 months ago, something quieter, something that sounded like respect. Grace Anderson did not need a motorcade to prove her worth. She never had. But on that Sunday morning, her worth was not what was being tested. Her humanity was. and she passed a test that she should never have been given. The body camera footage from that day has now been viewed over 100 million times. Grace's law passed the Illinois legislature unanimously. 3 other states have introduced identical bills. The statewide traffic stop audit revealed that black drivers in Illinois were stopped at 2.4 times the rate of white drivers. That number is now published monthly on a public dashboard that anyone can access. The highway is the same. The laws are changing. The signs are changing. But the question this story leaves behind is not about Grace Anderson. She had power. She had a title. She had a sister in the Senate and a motorcade 15 minutes away. The question is about the woman who doesn't. The woman sitting on a guardrail right now, somewhere in this country, on a highway you might drive tomorrow. No title, no motorcade, no cameras. Just a woman and a badge, and the silence of everyone who drives past without stopping. What happens to her? And if you were in one of those passing cars, would you stop? That is the question worth sitting with. That is the question worth sharing. Not because this story needs more views, because that woman needs more witnesses. If this story made you feel something, share it. Not for the algorithm, for the woman on the guardrail who nobody sees. Leave a comment. Tell us, have you ever been judged before you opened your mouth? Have you ever stayed silent when you should have spoken? Subscribe, because stories like this need to be told until the day they no longer need to be. The signs are changing, but only if we keep changing them.
30 minutes on a highway, 100 million views, and the Lord she shine herself, recorded every second of it. But you know what hit me hardest? It's not the badge, it's not the handcuff, it's Dorothy, Grace's mother, a teacher aide, 31 years, single income, 2 daughters, never held office, never gave a speech. But when her 9-year-old stood at the bus stop in Alabama, staring at the sign that said, "Whites only," Dorothy knelt down and said 5 words. "Baby, the sign is wrong. You are not." 5 words. That's all it took to build a governor. Because your worth was never something someone with a badge could take from you. It was never sitting in a title or a motorcade. It was played inside you by the people who loved you first, long before the world tried to tell you otherwise. Ray had a senator on speed dial and a motorcade 15 minutes away. But what about the woman who had neither? If dignity only shows up when power does, was it power does? Was it ever there? Because your worth was never something someone with a badge could take from you. It was never sitting in a title or a motorcade. It was played inside you by the people who loved you first, long before the world tried to tell you otherwise. Ray had a senator on speed dial and a motorcade 15 minutes away. But what about the woman who had neither? If dignity only shows up when power does, was it ever really there? Have you ever been judged before you open your mouth? Tell me in the comments. Share this not for the algorithm, for the woman nobody see. Subscribe. We are telling this story until the day we don't have to. The signs are changing, but only if we keep changing them.